All right, so it's the last day. I'm sure everybody's a little tired, so I'll try to keep this short and sweet and leave a little bit of time for questions. So we're going to be talking about design trends. I'm using the word trends a little loosely. I like the word signals a little bit better. But whatever is happening in Europe and how it's shaping kitchens and bathrooms and really the design industry at large in the US. I want to chat a little bit about, I know there's a lot of manufacturers and brand people in the room, and so I thought just talking about why these things are important and how we can adopt them to the US market while keeping in mind some things that are, more market specific. And then I'll talk a little bit too about the role that we designers play in essentially translating your message and the interpretation of the brand story to our consumers, to our end users. A little bit about myself. So I'm the founder and principal of Laure Nell Interiors. We're a residential, for the most part, interior design studio with studios in Boca Raton, Florida, and in Paris, France, where I'm originally from. I was raised in France, went to school there, studied art, history, and graduated with a master's in international relations. And I kept the studio there. I travel back and forth, and I specify a lot of brands and products from Paris and from France and Europe at large. I was just there, and then in London for Destination London, if anyone was there. So I feel like I'm, fairly well positioned to chat about this topic. Before I get diving in here, maybe we can talk for a second about why I think it's important to look to the European market when we're considering what we're doing here in the US. I will say that I spent a lot of time going to design shows kind of all around the world, and one thing I've noticed is that, let's use the word trends or signals or moment happening in Europe, whether it's on a fashion runway, at a design show, it usually takes, a year, 18 months, sometimes 2 years for that to become relevant in the US. So I think for brands, for makers who are looking to the American market, I think it's important to keep in mind what's relevant in Europe so that by the time of, the product introduction, it's relevant to the US market. I think one of the things that is really kind of like top of mind is the fact that what I call sort of like sustainable realism in Europe is something that has been top of mind for the European market for a really long time. What I mean by that is that I think that brands in Europe take a very close look at how things are made. Spaces in general tend to be smaller, so footprint of kitchen, of bathrooms, of all of those spaces are smaller. So therefore, things have to work and perform at a very, very high level in Europe for you to consider it because you don't have, that many options. Sustainability in general, craftsmanship, heritage is something that's also very top of mind. I think there's a little bit of obsolescence in the US that's kind of like built in, and I don't know if we have any other designers in the room, but not that we complain about the fact that our kitchens, our clients replace their kitchens every 5 years, but you don't really see that in Europe. And I think I read an article or a case study the other day about the average length of people holding on to real estate in Europe, and I think it's something like 70 years is the average. And it's probably less for younger generations or cities, but for the most part, in the US, it's 5 years. So there's kind of this like obsolescence of products sometimes. Trends are a little bit kind of like faster in the US, where I think in Europe, people pay attention to quality, craftsmanship. They want to hear the story behind it. They're a little willing also, I think, to wait a little bit longer for the right product. So keeping that in mind when you guys are developing products, I think talking about the performance, talking about the craftsmanship, feels relevant. This is a picture of my apartment in Paris with a lot of like concealed cabinetry. This is a project that we did in Florida, and I just thought it was interesting to see kind of like the colors be somewhat similar. Okay, so another, I don't know if it's a trend, but certainly something that's very top of mind in Europe right now is what I'm calling quiet luxury as a market differentiator. So this idea of sort of kind of like quiet money, like if you are successful, if you come from a fairly established, comfortable family, you want to do the opposite of the flashy look. So it's the very like Laura Piana, Brunello Cucinelli, Hermes kind of look. And the way I think that translates in terms of finishes, we're seeing a lot of matte finishes. We're seeing a lot of tonal depth. Like, I think we've moved away from the very high reflective surfaces, the high shine and all of that. Looking at detail over drama, less about the big kind of visual contrast and more, again, about these kind of like subdued details. So I think the translation to the US market means that same thing, right? I think we're shifting away from this like strong visual impact and looking more at like material intelligence. Again, craftsmanship, the finish consistency, just like the quality overall. And I think that brands that kind of quietly outperform those that are just like flashy aesthetically without like that performance component to it. Another element that I find to be very top of mind at a lot of design shows I've been going to in Europe lately is what I'm referring to, I guess, as soft modernism. So this is a picture of a shower. We did the primary bathroom at Kips Bay, Palm Beach last year, and I did a French bathroom, obviously. And it was important for me France is not just like Emily in Paris and the beret and there's a lot of different cultures. I wanted a shower that felt like maybe it's a little Middle Eastern, maybe it has Andalusian or Moorish details. And we're seeing that more and more and more, like these curves, this kind of like comfort style silhouette. At the show, there's a lot of products that my designer friends and I thought were cool, like these wood panels that wrap very easily, that you can bend and fold, and you can wrap an island, a column. And if you think about these spaces like kitchen and bathrooms where you need to be able to just move comfortably, and eliminating these like sharp angles and having all these curves just makes for a more comfortable, I might even say sensual, kind of way of evolving in the space. And so we're seeing a lot of these like softer transitions. Material honesty is a little bit of what I'm talking about, but this is another picture of an apartment I have in Paris. And the materials in Paris, especially, I'm going to use the kitchen as an example. I kind of did a sort of like deep architectural dive on this. Kitchens in Paris don't necessarily look like a kitchen. So what I mean with that is that materials can be things that you would not necessarily think to use in a kitchen, and there's even sometimes a fragility to these materials that I find kind of interesting. Lime wash, plaster, brass. And I was kind of like wondering why that is, but you'll be in a living room and the kitchen will very much blend in with the living room. And I'll use the example of these Haussmannian buildings. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with Haussmann architecture, and it's what you think of when you think of like a Paris building. Well, typically, what they call the noble, sort of like aristocratic floors were the first and second one, because we didn't have elevators, and so the higher you would go in the building, kind of like the lesser of an apartment it became. So kind of lower ceilings, smaller footprints and everything. Kitchens typically were in the very back of the apartment, and on the very top of the building, you would have what is referred to as maid quarters. So the higher up you would go, and if you look at these Haussmannian buildings, they had like these lucarnes, these kind of like smaller windows, and that's where your staff would live. So kitchens typically would be all the way back in the back of the apartment, and there would be a service door that the staff would use to exit discreetly, quietly, and go back to their quarters, right? Well, as we evolved into a modern lifestyle and the way we host and live now, kitchens have moved to the front of the apartment and are very much part of your everyday living. Our footprint is still smaller than it is in the US. And so as a result of that, our kitchens are part of the living room, are near the bedroom. So the kitchen will have a wood shelf that you display art on, or books on, or pictures or frames. And same thing with the materials. We're starting to see kind of like precious marbles. And we're also, I think, a little bit more open to things aging, right? Like patina and things not being so perfect and things being left out and all of that. So I think that's kind of like an interesting takeaway that we could probably implement to the US market. Kind of in the same vein but different. I'm personally still designing mostly kitchens that are very neutral, very tone on tone. This is a project we did in Florida, but I would say that the interest is more, let's say, in the grain of the wood than it is in the contrast of color. I think the hardware is kind of like still concealed, a lot of storage, but the impact is usually more on the tonality and the tactile component than on the visual contrast of it. Okay, personalization through integrated systems. I think that's probably, for us, for our clientele, I think the ultimate sense of luxury has become personalization. And if you have a spouse, I think need anticipation is a big love language for me. And I think it's kind of the same idea when you think of a kitchen or a bathroom. How can the kitchen sort of like anticipate your needs? Can the oven, and AI is obviously helping with a lot of stuff, but can the oven, go on at 7 o'clock on Thursdays with a rotisserie chicken because that's the night your kids have their lacrosse practice? Can the refrigerator give you a list of groceries for you to pick up? Can, just sort of like this, a lot of just personalization, and wellness is a big factor, and I'll chat about that very quickly in a second. But, kind of all of that. Like, do you like things? Do you like the AC, hot, cold? What's your color temperature? So really like that ultimate personalization, way beyond just monogramming things, really anticipating the way you live, is a trend or a moment that we're seeing a lot of. Stone, I just came back from the Cosentino CNEX retreat. If anybody was there, it was a lot of fun. And Stone is having a really, really interesting moment. And I find myself in projects incorporating quartz, quartzite, marble, all different kinds of stone. And I think that Europe tends to be maybe a little bit more modern sometimes than the US, but these very large slab stones, a lot of beautiful movement. Again, the color is very nuanced, and if you look at some of the palettes of our stone friends here, there's 50 nuances of beige. You used to kind of had the stone that was like you would get your green granite and your black, and now it's kind of these very subtle nuances, and we're kind of layering them on top of each other. Wellness. So, this is kind of a big thing. Wellness, both in bathroom and in kitchen. And I guess this one is important for me because it's a little bit about neuroaesthetics. So maybe it's just me and it's just my pet peeve, but I think there's so much noise pollution in the world, but really in the US a lot. I don't know when it became okay to be at an airport lounge and have a full video blast 24/7 or take every FaceTime call, or maybe I'm just being extra sensitive, but it's driving me crazy. And so there's a lot of manufacturers who are investing a lot of R&D in this neuroaesthetic, this wellness idea. In your kitchen, does it have to be a ding when the dishwasher ends? Could it be a melodic tune when you open your refrigerator at night to get a glass of milk? Does it have to be a jarring blue light, or could it be a dimmed one? Does your hood need to sound like a jet is taking off at the end of the runway? I mean, so all this like wellness lights that kind of go off automatically in the bathroom to not disturb your spouse in the middle of the night. So we're seeing a lot of this wellness component integrated in very smart fashion. Okay, so I'll wrap it up here and talk about kind of like the main takeaways. I think that for it to work in the US, you can take all these moments, all these different trends, but I think performance and convenience is a big one. I think like clear specs, there's like a need and a desire for transparency, and I see that a lot with my male clients. They want to know how it works, why it was designed that way. They want to hear the story behind it. It's kind of like they want to have that business conversation, very transparently and directly. I think size, lifestyle differences, things like that, like I talked about, I think there's a need for adoption. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs, I'll just say the name. It's Hermes Home, and they opened a showroom in the Design District in Miami. And they were kind of struggling. They just were not doing as well as they thought they were going to do. And I was asking him why, and he said, I think in Miami or in Florida maybe, when you spend this kind of money on a sofa, you need to be able to tell, and it's kind of like the opposite of Hermes. It's all about quiet luxury, where Fendi Casa had like the big, gold F on the side of the sofa, and they were doing better. So I bring this up because I always say, you can't just copy paste the same exact idea. There needs to be a translation. There needs to be education. I think there's a pace need in the U.S. I think clients here expect things like lead times to be quicker. So translation is a big factor. And then why I think Florida is a good, what I'm kind of calling like test market. I think Florida has become a pretty design literate market. I think also when I first moved, so I moved to the U.S., almost 20 years ago now, but when I first moved, I remember thinking that the U.S. was so geo-specific in the design. You kind of had like, even in Florida, right? Like the Miami look versus the Palm Beach look, and then it was, okay, traditional Connecticut, the mountain home. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are very, and after COVID, I kind of call it the post-COVID cross-pollination of design. I think people moved a lot. We have a lot of clients who are from Connecticut, Boston, Chicago, and who are moving to Florida with their own aesthetic. And so I just kind of like find that interesting, and I think Florida is a really, really good test market for that reason, because whatever applies here could at large apply in a lot of other parts of the U.S. These are kind of like the main bullet points take away from today. I think kitchens and bathrooms are becoming a lot more architectural, a lot more tailored. I think materials are becoming more about how they feel, the honed, the leathered, like all of that idea, the tactile, more so than the visual contrast. I think luxury is all about sort of like working smart, intelligence, being quiet, performance, craftsmanship, more so than flash. So, what can we do as brands, if we come from Europe, or what can we take away to kind of make it relevant to the U.S. market? I think investing in translation, really understanding how one message can apply to a local market. Designers, I love, and I'll share that because I know sometimes brands really go out of their way to invite us on these retreats and these educational things. And I love that because I become your spokesperson, right? I go back to our clients and I explain to them why it's made this way, why it's taking so long. I was in London and got invited to a company that makes chairs, and it was, very British, lovely. One man was carving the legs, another man was weaving pony hair, while another man was working on the springs. And I was like taking the footage. I'm like, I need to just send this to my clients to be like, this is why your chair is taking a little bit more than 4 days. This is being done in the backcountry of England. So keep sharing your stories with us. And then, manufacturers, same idea, right? Like the education, the storytelling, really important. And final thought is that the future of luxury is not louder, it's just smarter, and it feels very personal. Thank you. And if we have any questions.
Hi, thank you, that was great. Tell me a little bit, when I'm in Europe a lot, I see a lot of metal cabinets in the European market, but I really never see that here in the US. Have you seen that trend come this way?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think metal can be a little tricky only if you're not okay with oxidation, aging, scratching, things like that. And I think it kind of like goes back to, what I'm talking about when I say in France we're a little bit more open to this. I'm doing a beautiful home in Florida on the ocean, and it has all these copper gutters, and they've turned green over time. Well, the client hates that. And to me, like the verdigris of the copper is beautiful, so I think it's a very personal thing, which is also why I think a lot of these products that are more like these veneer wraps they look like metal, but maybe, withstand the test of time would probably be a good adaptation of a trend that, would work here.
What European brands do you think translate well to the U.S. market?
What European brands translate well to the American market? I love wall coverings and fabrics. I can probably talk about that a little bit better than I can about, appliances or things like that. Although I could talk about appliances too. I think if Europe tends to be a little bit, like I said, a little bit quieter, it can have like little prints and things like that that don't necessarily translate well here. But I think companies like Elitis, like Nobilis, like these brands of wall covering that have done a slightly larger version of their pattern for the U.S. market have done really well. I think companies like Miele have done really well because it's your concealed European cabinetry, but with the performance that the American market expects. So those are the ones that, come to mind.
Hi. I have a lot of family in Ireland, so I love to visit them and go see all their homes. I love how they incorporate like laundry in the kitchen and all the things. And the thing I find most fascinating is that they don't really have like trash. You know, my aunt will put like her tea box on the counter and that's where she puts all of her trash. Like, how would you suggest creating a luxury kitchen that we're such consumable people in the US? Like, how would you introduce that into a home that feels functional but kind to environment?
I love that question. So I think it starts a little bit even before you get to the trash point. So in I'll speak France, but I'm sure Ireland is very similar. You know, we don't have Costco. You know, we shop every day at the end of work. We go to the butcher, we go to the florist, we pick up, milk, we pick up. So, and maybe it's because we want fresh ingredients, but it's also because we don't really have a lot of storage space to put all that stuff. So our trash, first of all, our trash can is, a third the gallon size that it is in the US. And it's really, at most, a day's worth of trash. And even with that, back to the sustainability, composting, is a big thing in Europe. So you kind of like spread apart your orange peel that you're going to use for a Christmas candle. You save, my grandmother's like that, right? Like the cinnamon stick becomes something else. So I think it's kind of ingrained in the culture. It's a great question. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to know if you think that the U.S. market is a bit resistant for some of the materials that are used in Europe. And I'm going to give you an example. So we work with cabinetry, European style cabinetry, and we adopt the same materials there, like some types of engineered wood that differ from plywood and such. And I see, especially for older customers, that they are a bit resistant, even if those materials are just as good as the ones that are most commonly used here, or just because they look at it and they don't know what it is. So I just wanted to hear insights on that and how we can change that maybe, or just convince our clients that this product is really good.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, again, it speaks a little bit to the culture at large. So I'm going to say, first of all, if I ever sounds like I'm, criticizing the U.S., I'm not. I'm both, I'm half American, half France, love both flags. So I'm merely kind of like doing a comparison here. So I think in the U.S., you feel more comfortable being a little homogenous sometimes. There's this sense of like wanting to belong, the sense of like wanting it to look the same. You're kind of a little risk averse sometimes. We can be a little nervous, like you said, in the US. Oh, that's going to be a mistake. I think in France, certainly, and in Europe at large, I think the average consumer is a lot more just design educated. It's just a little bit more ingrained in your life, and so you kind of trust yourself a little bit more. I will also say that, the cool French girl factor, you don't want everybody to be able to tell what brand your bag is. It's kind of like you kind of like keep it to yourself. You want it to be a little bit different. So I guess my advice would be like keep trying. I see it with our American clients. They're taking more and more risks. They're more and more open. So I think it's a matter of time, hopefully.
I am so curious what the trend cycle is like in Europe versus here. I feel like I work for HGTV, so we're constantly like trends. And it constantly feels like trying to, write about the newest and latest thing. But I always feel like European style or trends are just like slower and just like more defined, whereas here it feels like, this is out 5 seconds after you write about it. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that. And
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, it's part of why, I mean, my topic was kind of like a little, not picked from me, but a little bit. So the word trends, I think, was in there because I think it's an attractive title to have. I struggle with that word for that exact reason. And you're a journalist or you're in the editorial world, so you'll appreciate this. I've been talking a lot on the concept of timely. Sure, it needs to feel current. I'm not saying that. You need to understand what's top of mind, what people want for it to be current and timely. But most importantly, timeless. You need to design something that if you truly, truly love it, and it goes back to not caring what other people think. Like if a trend is a trend right now, but you hate that color, don't do that. So I think to me the trends are in Europe. They're a little bit more classic. I will also say they're a little bit more authentic. And what I mean by that is, I'll talk about color specifically, and because I gave a talk on colors recently. If a color is naturally derived from nature, you are going to like it better. If it's a pink that's a dusty rose that is naturally produced by a volcanic beach that you were on, you're going to like it better than the Pepto-Bismol that might have a season that you're going to hate the next year because it's artificial. So anything that's artificial to me has a much shorter life cycle than something that's classic and authentic to you, really.
Any other questions? Okay, one more.
So you talked about all the matte finishes that are coming or being more introduced more. What is your take on the high lacquer, ceilings and high lacquer cabinets and things like that, that high gloss that we probably envision in Europe? What is your thought on that coupled with the matte?
What's funny is that as I was writing this slide, I was hoping nobody would ask me that. Because I'm going to contradict myself and say that I'm teasing, but it's true that as I was saying that, I love a color-drenched like lacquer library room. It's the best. So I think it's sort of like that artificial or not. I think if you pair that with maybe a fabric that feels a little used, that feels a little weathered, that feels like it has a story, I think it kind of balances the shine. I think our biggest fear as French people is being accused of bad taste. So we're always like, we do a little shine and then you're like, it's like that restraint. You're like, oh my God, did I cross that line? Is that too blingy? Like, how do I still make it tasteful? So I think shine, yes, if it's kind of balanced with aged brass or, like I said, the kind of woven textile or something to balance it.